Hey everyone, welcome back to Max Reddit Tales. I'm thrilled to bring you another jaw-dropping, unforgettable story that you won't want to miss. Today's tale is perfect for anyone who loves true revenge stories that leave you completely speechless. Before we jump in, make sure to hit that like button, and if you haven't already, don't forget to subscribe so you never miss your weekly fix of drama and justice. Now, grab a snack, get comfortable, and let's dive straight into today's story. You want to steal my lunch, eat my period. On my third day at the new job, I stood in front of the break room fridge staring at an empty lunchbox. The lid was still on, perfectly sealed, but inside, nothing. My chili, gone. No stain, no smear, not a single grain of rice. The room behind me was quiet, save for the low hum of the vending machine. No one was watching, but somehow, I felt watched. Maybe I forgot to pack it? Maybe I ate it and didn't remember? I laughed to myself nervously, but deep down, something twisted. You don't just forget an entire lunch. You don't just imagine cooking something that isn't there. The next time it happened, I didn't laugh. The next time, it was my teriyaki chicken. A meal I'd spent 2 hours prepping the night before. Gone. Only a faint soy smell lingering like a ghost. And it wasn't just gone. It was tauntingly gone. The fork was placed gently inside the box, as if the thief had dined like royalty and left behind the ruins of their banquet. The seal closed, the box undisturbed, like it had never been touched. Except it had. My stomach growled, but my pride howled louder. I began testing the edges of paranoia, quietly watching who entered the break room, noting who left with empty hands but smug smiles. The office was a maze of faces, but patterns began to emerge. A new twist struck me hard a few days later. My lunch disappeared again, and I noticed the exact same thing happened to a woman in the accounting department. We weren't even close, but her face told the same story: frustration, disbelief, and something darker: humiliation. But when she confronted the group jokingly, anyone here developing a taste for home-cooked meals that don't belong to them? The response was a cocktail of awkward chuckles and shrugs. No one confessed. No one cared. Something snapped in me. This wasn't just petty theft. This was control. A mind game, and someone in this office was winning it. That's when I first heard the name, quietly whispered in the hallway. Mark. Mark. The sales guy with the loud voice and louder opinions. The one who always strolled in with empty hands and full confidence. He had a reputation. A joke, really, that he was old school. Translation: misogynist, arrogant, untouchable, and something about the way people talked around him. Their silence was too familiar. That tight, uncomfortable laugh. The one you give when someone powerful crosses a line and you pretend not to notice. I started watching him more closely. That's when the twists started stacking like a house of cards. Mark never brought food, ever. He never ordered out. Yet he never missed a meal, always full, always grinning. And whenever a lunch went missing, he was mysteriously out of his cubicle. Coincidence? No, routine. The break room became a hunting ground, and I was the bait. One Monday, I arrived early and slipped into the hallway before anyone else arrived. I placed my lunch in the fridge, lasagna this time, something rich, tempting. I took a photo of it in the fridge at exactly 9:03 a.m. Then I marked the time. At 12:15, I walked casually to the kitchen. The box was there, still sealed, still labeled, but inside, scraped clean, again. I checked the timestamp on my security app. I'd rigged my phone to record through the break room blinds. Blurry, but enough. And there he was. Mark. Bold, calculated. He took the box, slipped into the corner, ate with his fingers like he owned it, then placed it back as if nothing ever happened. I watched it 3 times. My heart pounded like war drums, not just because he'd stolen again, but because of the audacity. This wasn't just food theft. This was psychological warfare. And then, the real twist, I reported it. I showed the footage to HR, hopeful, maybe even a little naive. They looked shocked, sympathetic, and then passive. "We'll look into it." That was the end of it. Days passed. Mark smirked more than usual. I heard him joking to another guy at the coffee machine. "Maybe I'm just irresistible, like their food." He knew I knew, and that made him bolder. I wasn't just a victim now, I was a target, and something inside me flipped. This story would not end with polite HR emails and dead-end complaints. I was going to burn the game board. But I'd do it slowly, silently, smart. I stopped packing real lunches. I began packing traps, highly specific meals, heavy sauces, unusual dishes, always something that left a strong scent. I needed to make sure he couldn't resist. And I began documenting everything. Times, faces, who entered when, who left. And every time a lunch vanished, Mark's pattern fit like clockwork. But it wasn't enough to expose him. I wanted to unravel him, to make him question reality, to make him afraid of the next bite. The final twist of segment 1? I began whispering rumors, planting seeds in the soil of gossip, telling coworkers I was trying a radical healing cleanse based on bodily cycles, dropping words like recycling nutrients and hormonal infusion. I spoke softly, always with just one person at a time, but I watched the ripple effect. A girl in HR whispered to a guy in payroll. Mark passed me in the hall and gave me a strange look. My plan was already infecting the office air like smoke before fire. I didn't need confrontation. I needed curiosity, paranoia, suspicion. I needed him to wonder, what exactly is she putting in her food now? Because soon he wouldn't just be stealing lunch. He'd be stealing his own nightmare. He didn't stop. If anything, Mark got cockier. It was like the rumors I'd whispered about my radical wellness cleanse only added spice to his appetite. Even after hearing I was experimenting with nutrient recycling, he still kept going back into that fridge. Still stealing, still pretending it wasn't him. That's when I realized I wasn't just dealing with a thief. I was dealing with someone addicted to control. He didn't steal because he was hungry. He did it because he could, because no one ever stopped him, because taking something from a woman without permission fed his ego in ways no lunch ever could. So I stopped playing defense. I went on the offensive. I began crafting meals not for taste, but for manipulation. Dishes designed like puzzles, strong smells, rich textures, exotic spices. I needed him hooked. I needed him to need it more than he feared it. My lunches became art, and every bite he stole was a stroke on the canvas of his collapse. But here's the twist. I never actually touched any of that food. It looked homemade. It smelled divine. But every dish came from pre-packed, untouched meals I bought at the market and reheated just enough to seem freshly made. I didn't want risk. I wanted illusion. I wanted control over the entire narrative. Then I did something darker. I left notes in the containers. Not obvious ones. Small slips of paper with handwritten affirmations like, "The body reclaims what it gives," or "Cycle, cleanse, consume." Nothing incriminating, nothing direct. Just enough to make him pause, to question, but never enough to stop him. And yet, he still ate it. That's when I knew. This wasn't about food anymore. This was obsession. He was chasing the thrill of stealing from someone who knew he was stealing. He thought he was outsmarting me. He had no idea I was feeding him fear. The next twist came when I invited conversation, very casually, with the girl from HR. I told her, over coffee, how I had started following a divine feminine ritual that involved reclaiming bodily nutrients. I mentioned that some people used placenta, but I was going deeper, more intimate. Menstrual blood, I said, was spiritually powerful, a self-sourced supplement. I said it like it was normal, ancient, sacred. She blinked, stared, then gave a weak smile and slowly nodded, pretending she understood, but I knew what would happen next. HR was a sieve. A whisper there traveled faster than email, especially when it was this kind of whisper. By the end of the day, 3 people were suddenly avoiding eye contact. Perfect. The following morning, I brought my pièce de résistance, a creamy tomato-based pasta with a deep red hue and a slightly metallic aroma. I placed it gently in the fridge. My name clearly marked. I added a note, folded just enough to peek out under the lid, full cycle, rich in iron, do not share. Then I sat back at my desk and waited. At 1:07 p.m., he entered the break room. I didn't need a camera this time. I could hear the rhythm of his footsteps, the pause, the soft click of Tupperware. I imagined him peeling back the lid and staring at the food, his mind racing. Maybe he remembered the whispers. Maybe he noticed the note. Maybe, just for a second, he hesitated. But then came the sound of plastic clicking closed again. The box was back, but lighter. He had eaten it. I checked the fridge at 1:23. The pasta was half gone, and so was the note. That was the moment I knew I'd broken through. Not just into his routine, but into his mind. Later that afternoon, Mark walked past my desk, slowly. He looked directly at me. His usual smirk was gone, replaced with something unreadable. He paused, as if he wanted to say something, but didn't. I tilted my head, smiled. He walked away. That night, I filmed a video in my kitchen. No sound, just visuals. A staged cooking session. Me opening a fake menstrual cup, cleaned, of course, standing over a pot. I edited it to look like I was pouring it into the sauce, stirring slowly. I never showed the final dish, just enough to plant the horror. The next day, I waited for him to be in the break room, and then casually showed the video to a coworker across the room, loud enough for him to glance over. I leaned in and said, "I've been documenting everything for my cleanse journey. Helps me stay focused." She looked confused, uncomfortable. Mark looked disturbed. Exactly what I wanted. Later that week, I brought a new lunch, a stew this time. Dark, reddish. I left a new note. Harvested during the new moon. The container came back untouched, finally. But the twist wasn't over. On Thursday, Mark didn't show up to work. On Friday, he was still absent. On Monday, his desk was cleared. No announcement, no memo, just silence. People talked, of course. Family emergency, someone said. Stress leave, said another. But I noticed how no one looked me in the eye when they mentioned it. The fridge? Still there. Still humming. But now untouched. My food sat peacefully, undisturbed. No more theft, no more game. But every time I opened that fridge door, I smiled. Because it wasn't revenge. It wasn't just about scaring a man off his stolen throne. It was about something more dangerous, making him eat the fear he once served. He came back. After a week of silence, of whispers in the hallway and cold stares at the empty desk, Mark walked into the office like nothing had happened. But I saw it. The stiffness in his shoulders, the haunted flicker in his eyes. Something had shifted in him, something I had placed there like a seed in wet soil. He didn't look at me, didn't smirk, didn't strut. He kept his head down, eyes darting only when he thought no one was watching. But I was. I watched everything, and I made sure he knew it. That Monday, I didn't bring food, I brought presents, I wore red. Not just a hint, head-to-toe crimson, a silk blouse, a deep maroon lipstick, red earrings shaped like drops. I walked slowly, deliberately. I greeted coworkers with kindness, then looked directly at him and said with a smile, "Good to see you back, Mark." He didn't respond, just nodded, almost flinched, then walked away. The entire day passed like a chess match. I made no moves, but every second I existed in his line of sight, I was in his head. And by the time I returned home that night, I knew this wasn't over, not yet. One last push, and I could finish it. That's when the real plan took form. I had already let rumors simmer. I had already let him taste paranoia. Now, I'd serve him full-blown psychological chaos. I spent the night editing. The fake cooking video I had casually shown a coworker earlier, that was only the teaser. Now, I made it real, convincing, sinister. I filmed it in silence, dim lighting, candlelight flickering in the background, a cutting board, herbs, a steaming pot. I held the menstrual cup like it was sacred, then slowly tipped it into the pot of tomato sauce. Thick, red, bubbling. I stirred it rhythmically, never breaking eye contact with the camera. I sliced herbs. I whispered things, unintelligible but rhythmic, like incantations. I made it feel ritualistic, pagan, unholy. I didn't need to tell him what was in it. I needed him to believe it. I saved the video on my phone and waited. The next day, I chose my moment. I waited until he was alone in the break room, scrolling his phone, pretending to read something. I walked in, placed a bright red Tupperware box into the fridge with a soft click, and opened my phone. I sat at the table just a few feet from him, acting like I wasn't even aware of his presence. Then I pressed play. No sound, just visuals, the red sauce, the cup, the stirring. I didn't look at him, but I felt the moment he noticed. I didn't flinch, I didn't react, I just let the video play through. Then quietly stood, smiled, and walked out. Later, I returned to the fridge. My lunch? Still there, untouched. But in the corner of the container, I saw something strange. A fingerprint, a smudge, as if someone had opened it, and then stopped. The game had changed. The following morning, I escalated. I printed a small photo of the meal from the video, stained it with red sauce, and taped it inside the fridge. Nothing dramatic, nothing loud. Just enough to look accidental. Enough to trigger a memory. When Mark saw it, he paled. I watched him from across the room as he closed the fridge without touching anything. He sat at his desk without eating. He didn't look up once for the next hour. His hands shook when he typed. He spilled his coffee. And then, just before lunch, he walked straight into the bathroom and stayed there for nearly 40 minutes. I never asked what happened. I didn't need to. But the paranoia was spreading. Whispers multiplied. I overheard 2 girls in the hallway giggling nervously. "Do you think it's true?" one said. "I heard she's putting it in her food, like on purpose." I passed them slowly and smiled. "Iron is essential for the body," I said, "especially during the full moon." They froze. One of them dropped her phone. The fear was no longer private. It had grown into an office-wide virus. And Mark? Mark was ground zero. But I wasn't done yet. That night, I bought a bottle of beet juice, thick, dark, blood red. The next morning, I brought a clear container filled with pasta swimming in it. I labeled it Sacral Cleanse Number 3. I left a small sticky note on top, infused with the cycle of renewal. It never got touched. But Mark? He left the building before lunch, claimed a migraine, never came back that week. Every day after, I continued bringing bizarre red-tinged meals. Sometimes I added labels like Harvested Under Venus Retrograde or Lunar Flow Detox Blend. All nonsense, all terrifying to someone with an overactive imagination and a guilty conscience. And then came the final twist. Friday afternoon, I walked past his desk and dropped a small folded piece of paper into his inbox. No one saw me, no one even noticed. He opened it 30 minutes later. All it said was, "You should see a doctor. Blood carries more than you think." He didn't finish the day. He didn't come back the next week, and just like that, the break room became quiet again. The fridge? Safe. My lunches? Untouched. But the best part? I never laid a hand on him. I never screamed, never accused. I simply let him drown in his own guilt, fed him fear, spoonful by spoonful, until his appetite turned to ashes. And all it took was a lie he was desperate enough to believe. The air had changed. You could taste it, like static before a lightning strike. Mark hadn't spoken to anyone in days. He moved like a man underwater, slow and off balance, every step looking like it cost him something. The office noticed, but no one dared say a word. The man who once laughed the loudest, who made off-color jokes and barked over small meetings, now barely whispered. And when he did, his voice cracked like something was slipping beneath it. He was breaking, and I could feel it from across the room. I didn't need to confront him. I didn't even need to be near him. The power had already shifted. Every meal I packed now was pure theater, deliberately strange, always read, always labeled with some cryptic phrase. The fridge had become a shrine to a mystery nobody dared unravel. But that Monday, I decided to go further. I brought a clear mason jar filled with what looked like dark syrup, beet juice mixed with soy sauce. I floated pomegranate seeds inside it and dropped in dried herbs. Then I printed a label. Inner Purge, Cycle 4, Fermented. I placed it in the fridge with surgical precision, made sure it was the only thing visible on the top shelf. And then I waited. No one touched it, not even close. But by 11:45 a.m., Mark was pacing near the break room again. I watched from my cubicle as he hovered just outside, staring into the fridge, arms crossed. He didn't go in. He just stood there, like a man standing outside a crime scene, realizing the body inside was his own sanity. Then he turned and looked directly at me. It was the first eye contact in over a week. There was no anger, no smugness, only fear. And I smiled. That night, I got a message request on my personal Instagram from an anonymous profile. No posts, no followers. The message read, "I know what you're doing. Stop." There was no name, but it didn't need one. I let it sit there unanswered. Let him stew in the silence. Because silence is louder than any confession. The next morning, he didn't come to work. But something else did. A memo, corporate email, sent from HR. Reminder, the break room fridge is a shared space. All employees are expected to label their meals clearly and respect personal property. Any inappropriate use of shared appliances or disturbing content will result in disciplinary review. No names, no accusations, but the entire office was buzzing. Disturbing content. Everyone knew. They didn't say it, but they knew. Some people started watching me differently, some with unease, others with quiet admiration. A couple of women from accounting smiled at me for the first time, like they finally understood what I had done. One even whispered as she passed me, honestly. Thank you. It wasn't just about lunch anymore. This had become a message. For every woman who got talked over in meetings. For every intern whose coffee was taken without a thank you. For every silent glance we endured in the break room when we dared take up space. Mark had crossed a line. I just made sure he remembered where it was, but it didn't stop there. Wednesday. He returned, visibly thinner. Eyes bloodshot, unshaven. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. And when he passed me, he didn't look at me. He looked through me. Like I wasn't just a coworker anymore, I was something else. A shadow he couldn't escape. I brought a red smoothie that day, raspberry, beet, a dash of cayenne. I sipped it at my desk slowly, making sure he could hear the sound of the straw. Every time I put the glass down, I left a faint red ring on the paper next to my keyboard, and I made sure he saw every mark. Later that afternoon, he approached my desk for the first time in 2 weeks. He hovered, trembling. Then, in a voice so low I almost didn't catch it, he said, "What do you want from me?" I didn't answer. I just looked up, blinked slowly, and said, "Respect," and then turned back to my screen. He stood there for a full 30 seconds, then walked away. The next morning, his resignation letter hit management's inbox. No explanation, no exit interview, gone. But the impact didn't leave with him. The office had shifted. The fridge stayed quiet. No more missing lunches, no more notes. But people started labeling their meals better. Conversations got more respectful. The jokes, especially the ones that towed the line, stopped altogether. I became something between legend and warning. Some called me crazy behind closed doors. Some called me brave, but no one touched my food again. That was enough. Because this wasn't revenge, not really. It was a message carved into the silence of a shared refrigerator. A message that whispered, "We're not powerless. We see you, and we will outthink you." But perhaps the real twist was this. He never knew what was real and what was fake. He never tasted blood. He only tasted fear. It's strange how quiet victory feels. No cheers, no closure, no dramatic scene in a conference room. Just silence, the kind that wraps around the office like fog after a downpour. Mark was gone. His resignation slipped through like a rumor that didn't need confirmation. No announcement, no explanation. His desk, once the loudest space in the room, now sat in eerie stillness, as if the ghost of his arrogance still lingered there, waiting to be noticed and ignored at the same time. People pretended to move on, but the air had memory. Conversations were softer now. The fridge, once a battlefield, had become a neutral zone. No missing lunches, no mysterious thefts. But what stood out more than anything else was how no one, not a single soul, dared to ask me about it. They didn't ask what I did, they didn't want to know. And that's how I knew the fear had spread deeper than I intended. Mark was gone, but the echo of what happened hadn't left. There were moments when I wondered if I had become too much, too calculated, too cruel. Not because I regretted it, but because I knew I had changed the story in ways people wouldn't soon forget. I wasn't just the girl who had her lunch stolen anymore. I was the myth, the walking rumor, the reason everyone double-checked the fridge label before touching anything that wasn't theirs. And while some looked at me with discomfort, others, especially the quiet ones, looked at me with something close to respect. Quiet nods, half smiles. A woman in accounting who never said a word to me before suddenly offered to grab me coffee one afternoon. No explanation, just kindness. A silent thank you for the justice that never comes through proper channels. But the most powerful part of it all wasn't the fear. It wasn't even the silence. It was the doubt. the seed I planted in Mark's mind, the possibility that he had consumed something he could never erase. That seed was still alive, still growing in the dark, still whispering to him in the silence of his guilt. And the final twist? That I never confirmed or denied anything. The power lived in the unknown. I continued my routine, almost theatrically. I still packed odd lunches, still labeled them with vague, unsettling phrases, still ate them slowly, deliberately, in full view of the break room. It wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about presence. A reminder to the next Mark in the making that there are consequences not just for what you take, but for who you assume won't fight back. I had rewritten the office food chain, and now they knew I wasn't at the bottom of it. Then came the envelope. It appeared in my mailbox one Thursday morning. Plain white. No handwriting, no logo, just my name printed neatly on a sticker label. I turned it over in my hands a few times before opening it. Inside was a single piece of paper. Small, crisp, folded once. I unfolded it slowly, the silence around me feeling heavier than usual. And there, in simple black type, was a message. You win, just tell me. Was any of it real? No signature, no initials. But I didn't need either. I read it 3 times. That one question said everything. He was still haunted. He had left the company, changed his scenery, probably told himself he was done with all of it. But he hadn't escaped. He couldn't. The story followed him. The doubt embedded so deeply in his mind that he needed to ask. He needed to know if he had actually consumed something from me, if he had crossed into a boundary far more intimate than theft. But he didn't really want the truth. He wanted to unknow what he couldn't forget. And that's when I realized something chillingly beautiful. I never needed him to suffer forever. I just needed him to never feel clean again. I folded the note and slipped it into my drawer without a word. I didn't answer. I wouldn't. That would kill the illusion. No, he would live with the maybe. That was more powerful than a yes or no. And in that moment I felt it wash over me. Not anger, not victory, but something far rarer. Peace. Because this wasn't just about revenge. It wasn't even about him. It was about reclaiming control in a place where power was stolen in small, everyday humiliations. A missing lunch, a disrespectful glance, a knowing smirk, and the idea that no one would ever stand up, that we were supposed to shrink. But I didn't shrink. I expanded into his mind, into the office, into the system that enabled men like him. And I didn't have to raise my voice. I didn't need approval. I didn't even need anyone to believe me. I just needed one man to wonder what he had swallowed. And now, even in his absence, he'd still taste it. Sometimes, the most devastating revenge is the one you never see coming. The one that doesn't explode. It lingers. It's the aftertaste, the stain on a fork, the memory of something you might have done, replaying in your mind over and over, louder each time you try to forget. He didn't fear me. He feared the idea of me. And that, my friend, is how you win without ever drawing blood. If this story kept you hooked till the end, imagine what's coming next. For more dark revenge, real confessions, and jaw-dropping twists, hit that subscribe button and join the journey with Max, the Reddit story. Don't forget to like, comment, and share this with someone who needs to know. The fridge is watching. Because here, every story has a shadow, and every shadow has a voice. Subscribe to Max, the Reddit story, and never miss the next chapter.